Hi, I'm Cody Anderson, one of the pastors here at Parker United Methodist Church. I'm sitting in the front right corner of our sanctuary where we have this beautiful space that is for our children and our families who come to worship. Now, sometimes this space is used at our 9 a.m. worship, but more often than not, it is our 10:30 service that really knows this area well. The kids come and they play. Parents sit on the ground just like I am, reading stories to their kids, playing and worshiping together. It is a beautiful thing to witness and actually has inspired me to think about how the lessons that our children have for us can really inspire our own faith. So I came across this wonderful book as we've been thinking about our stewardship series and releasing our blessings. I came across this wonderful book that I want to share with you today. It's called Extra Yarn. Extra Yarn by Barnett, illustrated by John Klassen. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black of soot from chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. So she went home and knit herself a sweater, and when Annabelle was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars too, but there was still extra yarn. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. But it turned out he was. And even after she'd made a sweater for Nate and his dog, and for herself and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet!" shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone! Annabelle, that sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you." "Then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabelle said, "so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." But it turned out she could, and she did, even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mom and dad and for Mr. Pendleton and Mrs. Pendleton and for Dr. Palmer and for little Lewis. She made sweaters for everyone except Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters or even long pants and who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat, and even then Annabelle still had extra yarn. She made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats and for other animals too. Soon, people thought, soon Annabelle will run out of yarn. But it turned out she didn't. So Annabelle made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Things began to change in that little town. News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabelle's hand. One day, an archduke who was very fond of clothes sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabelle. "Little girl," said the archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I'm willing to offer you $1 million. "No, thank you," said Annabelle, who was knitting a sweater for a pickup truck. The archduke's mustache twitched. "$2 million, he said. Annabelle shook her head. "No, thanks." $10 million, shouted the archduke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave it," said Annabelle. "I won't sell the yarn." And she didn't. So that night, the archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house, and they stole the box and took it to the archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea back to his castle. The archduke put on his favorite song and sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box and he lifted his lid and he looked inside. His mustache quivered. It shivered. It trembled. The archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, "Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse. You will never be happy again." But It turned out she was. The end. Extra Yarn. Isn't that a great book? I love children's books because they can take a concept and really help your imagination and see the ways that we might be able to apply those lessons to our own lives. See, as we've been talking about generous living and blessed to be a blessing, I couldn't help but think of this book. The way that Annabelle finds this yarn and she knits something for herself and for her dog Max, but there's extra. And so she begins to see who else needs, and there's still extra. And so she then makes her town beautiful, and there's still extra. See, she won't sell that gift of extra for anything. And even when someone takes it, they don't get that gift of extra. It is Annabelle's to give. I wonder what's extra in our own lives. I wonder if we might have an extra that we might be able to give to somebody else and see that miracle of something being given over and over and over, and that blessing of the multitudes. Reminds me of that story of Jesus, who's gathered with his disciples and 5,000 people, and they're hungry. And so Jesus asks if there is food, if anyone has any food to share, and comes up with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And then a miracle happens. He breaks the bread and he shares the fish, and all of a sudden there's enough for everybody. And there's 12 baskets that are left, right? It is almost the miracle that we see in Extra Yarn, of giving what you have, of what little there might be, but then seeing how that gift might be multiplied. I wonder sometimes if that little boy who gave of his gift to Jesus, of the bread and the fish, just was astounded by how it fed everybody. What are those gifts that we have? Is it financial gifts that God has generously given to us? And so maybe we think about the extra that we have and how God might begin to multiply that when we give that away. Or is it the gift of love? Maybe we have been poured into with our lives a gift of love and comfort and grace and all those things that family and friends give to us. And now we're thinking that maybe we could share that extra that we have with somebody else who doesn't have enough. What is the extra that you have been given? And how might you share that with others? On this Thanksgiving week, I give thanks for you and for the gifts that you have given, the ways that I have seen it multiply within our faith community and also in our community around us. Just this morning, from your gifts, I was able to give to a family of 6 who didn't have a Thanksgiving meal. We were able to provide them with food, with diapers, and enough to be able to have extra for their Thanksgiving. And I keep thinking about the ways that we give that keep multiplying in our community and in our world. So be thankful this Thanksgiving for what you've been given. And also start to open your eyes, your hearts, to see how God might be calling you to give your extra. And see what God might do with that gift of extra yarn. God bless you, and have a great Thanksgiving.